Okay. Good morning, everyone. If we can take a seat, we can start our class. Thank you. Okay, so we welcome everyone here. Good morning, everyone. Let's start this class, this special class of our course on European economic integration. And thanks to all my colleagues and the staff who was organized the logistics of this joint event. It's wonderful to have the full course together in front of me. Good morning also to Marcella Boroli, who's arriving, and and all the Boroli family in front of me. Let me, first of all, thank you, the Boroli Foundation, for making this event, yearly event on Europe, possible every year. And let's start with the introduction of our rector, Francesco Billari, to whom I give the floor. Thank you, Francesco.
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you, Professor Altomonte. It's a crucial moment for us to discuss about these things. So I have a speech, but maybe I will add a couple of things. Dear students, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, members of the Bocconi and the Boroli communities. I'm really honored to welcome you today to this significant event. And this event is located within the Achille and Giulia Boroli Chair in European Studies. This is a kind of distinguished occasion that is celebrating academic excellence, research and teaching, but also pays tribute to the enduring legacy of Achille Boroli, who we discussed before was also a member of the first European Parliament. And first of all, I'd like to welcome our distinguished guest, Professor Arancha Gonzalez. She's the Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po, one of our partner institutions in Paris. But she has also been the Spanish Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation, so slightly on the topic. And Professor Gonzalez will deliver a speech entitled Europe's Place in a Changing International Order. We chose the topic before last week, by the way, so you can see we have some foresight in this place. And so I'd like to express our deepest gratitude to Professor Gonzalez for agreeing to share with us her valuable personal and professional insights. And by the way, after her presentation, she will dedicate time to question and answer session, offering our dear students the opportunity for a dialogue, which we hope will be stimulating. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to the foundation, in particular to Andrea Boroli, the Vice President of the foundation, and to Giuseppe Alemanni, President of the foundation, and to the whole Boroli family representatives, the entire foundation delegation, and also to our alumnus of the year, Marco Drago. Our partnership with the Boroli Foundation represents an intellectual alliance deeply rooted in the shared value of educational innovation, research, and transformative potential of knowledge. Over these years, this relationship has evolved, generating even more meaningful intellectual opportunities for cooperation. A central moment in this journey came in 2018 when the foundation believed in Bocconi, demonstrating extraordinary confidence in us, and established the Fondazione Achille e Giulia Boroli Chair in European Studies, entrusted to the distinguished colleague, Professor Gianmarco Ottaviano, who will conclude this event. And Professor Ottaviano, as we know, is one of the top scholars at Bocconi and a respected and internationally recognized academic in the field of European studies. All initiatives associated with this chair are designed to promote research and policy relevant educational excellence at the school and university level, to contribute to the dissemination of culture and knowledge. This trajectory of our chair is brought to life thanks to the synergy between two of our stars. I already mentioned Professor Ottaviano, but I would like to mention Professor Carlo Altomonte. Professor Altomonte, who will introduce and moderate today's event, has been instrumental in developing the Bocconi-Boroli partnership and the different initiatives of the chair. So I'm really grateful to Professor Altomonte and Professor Ottaviano for your outstanding work in developing this chair, and we see that also from today's event, honoring again the lasting vision of Achille and Giulia Boroli. And this has been also thanks to the researchers, faculty members, and the students who have contributed to the collaborative effort. By the way, Sciences Po is one of our partners in the Civica project, the European University. So I like also to welcome all the Civica students who have participated who are participating to the 4th edition of the Capstone Project competition. Someone will join us online, but I hope some of you are here. Raise your hand, Civica. Yeah. Okay, thank you, welcome. And I thank my friend and colleague, Professor Francesco Saita, Dean for International Affairs at Bocconi, for being here today. And he will announce the winning teams of the competition. Do we have Oscar statue? Hope, given the time. And this competition embodies the foundation commitment to inspiring and recognizing students who have excelled in European affairs. Thank you again, and I leave the floor to Andrea Boroli for his remarks. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Grazie a tutti e buongiorno. Io parlo in italiano perché il mio inglese è un po' primitivo. Grazie soprattutto agli studenti e alle studentesse, grazie di essere qui, tutti quanti anche che partecipano a questo evento online. Achille Boroli, che per tutta la vita ha sostenuto l'Europa come patria allargata, i giovani come portatori di speranza e di futuro, l'educazione e la cultura come mezzi formidabili per comprendere e condividere principi e valori, superare ostilità e differenze, decidere e agire per l'autentico bene comune. Esprimo anche a nome dei miei fratelli e della Fondazione Achille e Giulia Boroli ogni riconoscenza all'Università Bocconi per l'ospitalità che ogni anno ci consente di celebrare il nostro padre Achille, imprenditore coraggioso e lungimirante, innovativo e sempre profondamente umano. Grazie al presidente professor Andrea Sironi, al rettore professor Francesco Billari, al consigliere delegato Riccardo Taranto, alla direzione alunni e fundraising dell'università, al suo straordinario staff, capace di organizzare incontri come quelli di oggi. Grazie a Civica, al professor Francesco Saita, alle grandi università europee, Bocconi prima di tutte, che compongono il consorzio, ai suoi docenti e ai giovani che lavorano con intelligenza e impegno per promuovere l'Unione Europea, sempre più indispensabile per la pace e il progresso individuale e collettivo. Un grazie particolare alla cattedra degli studi europei, dove il professor Gianmarco Ottaviano e il professor Carlo Altomonte, i ricercatori, le studentesse e gli studenti, sostengono l'Unione Europea con tenacia e tanto lavoro. Grazie soprattutto ad Arancha Gonzalez, Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs di Sciences Po e già Ministro degli Affari Esteri dell'Unione Europea e della Cooperazione Internazionale di Spagna. La sua esperienza eccezionale le consente di comprendere e parteciparci con chiarezza, sapienza e accortezza i complessi scenari attuali e i loro possibili sviluppi. Permettete ora di ricordare mio padre Achille, imprenditore, è stato detto tanto, grande editore, signore degli Atlanti, delle enciclopedie e delle grandi opere e a volumi. Dell'uomo e del padre posso dire che la sua vita è stata segnata da costanti passioni, libertà, volontà, rispetto e l'Europa. Di sicuro conoscete le parole delle famose Meditation 17 di John Donne. Nessun umano è un'isola intero in se stesso, ognuno è un pezzo di un continente, una parte del tutto. Se una zolla è lavata via dal mare, l'Europa si fa più piccola, come se fosse sparito un promontorio, il maniero di un amico o la tua stessa dimora. La morte di un uomo mi diminuisce perché io sono coinvolto nell'umanità. E dunque non cercare mai di sapere per chi suona la campana, suona per te. In termini più prosaici si può dire che privare gli uomini del loro volto e della loro individualità è una forma di male non meno grave che togliere loro la dignità. Per questo mio padre declinava la libertà come volontà di essere e di fare con giustizia. Per questo credeva che ci può essere buona politica senza verità, lealtà e sapienza. Per la stessa ragione credeva che i partiti dovessero essere una casa trasparente, avendo nelle idee e nel fare l'obiettivo del benessere individuale e collettivo. Da vero liberale aveva interiorizzato l'aforisma di John Stuart Mill, secondo il quale si è felici solo quando si dedica la propria vita a una causa degna di essere perseguito, dove libertà di, libertà da e libertà per sono sempre più accessibili a tutti e tutti possono correre a produrre e consumare responsabilmente in difesa della vita e dell'ambiente che ci accoglie. Questo significava per Achille Boroli mettere in campo a monte un nuovo umanesimo in economia, a cominciare dall'implementazione degli studi accademici. Inoltre promuovere il cambio di passo radicale nel rapporto capitale-lavoro, alleati e non contrapposti. Soprattutto intendere il lavoro come un fine e non solo come un fattore di produzione, considerando il rispetto reciproco e il capitale umano condizio sine qua non. Sono idee e progetti visionari, certo hanno bisogno di spazio, di energia e di volontà, realizzabili per mio padre solo in un'Europa di donne e uomini liberi da condizionamenti e da egoismi, più o meno legittimi, persone capaci e formate per superare obiezioni meschine legate a interessi locali, in definitiva a una sostanziale ignoranza o peggio a ideologie devastanti già condannate dalla storia. La vostra Europa, cari giovani, sappiate lottare per farla diventare realtà. Grazie. Grazie al professor Altomonte.
Thank you. So we can start. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Francesco, for your nice introduction. I think we can start our class. Let me just give you some introductory remarks in the topic, and then I will leave the floor to Professor Gonzalez, to Arancha. Let me start with a memory. When I was at school as a boy, I saw
our generation, so our liberties progressively increased. Progressively, as I went to high school and then to Bocconi, I became free to study and work in the European Union without permits or controls. I became free to buy goods and services from overseas without paying high tariffs or anything like that. I became free to communicate with my friends in Italy and abroad through emails and social media, and what was impossible to achieve before, very high cost, and became obvious and cheap. And then I became free to travel at very low cost, which probably saved my relation with Silvia, my wife, when I moved to Brussels, because I could, for the first time, take a low-cost flight, which was not existing before. Now it started to exist. And all those freedoms were given to me by the work of the past generation, by figures like Achille Boroli and their battle of ideas, their work, their consistent investment into a free society. Now I fast forward today, I'm speaking to you, and while I teach every day, and I keep wondering whether what I'm teaching, what the policy solution that we are providing you with, the freedom that I benefited from makes sense in the new, whatever uncertain world we are building. I wonder every day whether your generation, your future, will endure the same benefits and privileges that I've been gifted with. This is the question that I wake up every day, and it's a bothersome question. But so I'm sure I'll have of three things, and I would like to start building around these three things, and I'm sure Arancha will follow up on that. The first certainty that I have is that whatever the world might throw at us, and we wake up every morning with strange and new tweets from somewhere in the planet that is changing the world as we know it, our main hope, or preserving and improving on the current condition, whether you are Chinese, American, Russian, African, or European, our main hope is the European project. The European project, whether or not you are European, upholding values of peace, solidarity, and freedom in the world, is a stabilizing project for the world, not for Europe, for the world, for your future. Second, and I'm sure, however, that this project does not come for granted. We need to strive and defend and advance every day our social model and preserve our freedom. The future that I had given will not be given to you if you don't defend that model and that project. And third, however, I am aware of what I've been given from the previous generation. I was given a word that allowed me to grow and prosper in peace and freedom. And I feel the moral obligation to do the same for your generation. And I'm sure, I know, that I'm not alone into this. All my colleagues sitting here in the front row, all my colleagues in the Civic Alliance, we are all ready to strive and fight the ideal battles that are needed in order to grant you a future. And you have to be with us on this, okay? So we have to keep up on this endeavor together. And I'm very glad that we will hear from one of the most visionary leaders in Europe today, which is Arancha Gonzalez. And pay careful attention of her words, because they will design the roadmap that we will have to go through in these very uncertain times. But I'm sure that together we can keep on preserving the world as we know it and even improve on it. Thank you very much, Arancha, for being here with us, and long live Europe.
Buongiorno a tutti e tutte, Presidente Andrea Sironi, Rettore Francesco Villari, Vicepresidente della Fondazione Achille e Giulia Boroli, Andrea, Marcella, tutta la famiglia, professoresse, professoressi e studenti. Good morning. It really is an honor for me to be here today and to talk about Europe. And to talk about Europe's place in the world. And to do that with you, and I want to start where Carlo left it. The European project is an unfinished project. It had a beginning, but for it to continue, it needs the constant energy, the energy that passes from generations to generations. And today, the European Union needs a lot of our energy because these are difficult times for Europe. These are difficult times for Europe because lots of the things that we thought were solid are in reality liquid, if not gaseous. Europe thought that the international rules-based order was solid. And now, this international rules-based order is turning into a power-based disorder. Where there were opportunities and where there was hope, these power relationships is leading to fear and zero-sum mentality. Let me be very honest with you. The rules of this international rules-based order, the rules were not perfect. Many thought that the rules were unfair. They were unfair because they were not there when the rules were being built. Or they are unfair because they don't think that they represent the current balance of power or the current share of responsibilities. But imperfect as these rules are, they have helped us organize living together between nations that are very different, very diverse, in a very diverse international community. The rules were not perfect, but they provided a sense of protection for all, including those that are smaller in size, that are weaker in power, and for whom the rules were a guarantee of stability and predictability. Of course, a rules-based order is only as strong as there is a desire on the members of this international community to self-restrain, to display good behavior, especially by those members that are systemic. So what is systemic? It's countries that have specific responsibilities. When they abide by the rules, they are sending a signal. When they violate the rules, they are also sending a signal. So when a permanent member of the UN Security Council violates international rules, violates the principle of sovereignty or territorial integrity, it is sending a signal. When the largest CO2 emitters don't undertake ambitious CO2 reductions, or they even question the existence of climate change, they are sending a signal. When large international traders engage in unfair trading practices, they are sending a signal. When democracies are ready to violate international human rights or international humanitarian law, they are sending a signal. The signal is that the rules don't matter to them. Even worse, that they expect others to respect the rules when they are not ready to respect them. The famous double standards. When systemic actors don't self-restrain, the moral suasion of an international system is weakened. And this is what's happening today. The weakening of the international rules-based order is an issue for Europe, is a problem for Europe. Not because the European Union is particularly virtuous. It's not. It's that the European Union itself is a big rules-based system. Is when we question the international rules-based international order, we are questioning the very principles on which the European Union is built. The EU thought that convergence internationally was solid, that integration into one system was the road to go. And now convergence is giving way to fragmentation. Interdependence, which is what we have built over the last 80 years, is now giving way to weaponization. The post-Berlin Wall world led to great economic integration under one roof, under one system. The idea that every economy in the world could be placed under the same system, with the hope that this system would lead to the convergence of the economic functionings of all these economies. It was the idea that opening and reform and opening was going to give us collective progress. And this is how, in the shortest span of my professional life, I saw enter into the World Trade Organization nations as diverse, or economies as diverse as China and Taiwan, as Russia and Ukraine, as Vietnam and Saudi Arabia. All of them became members of this one system. All of them converge under this one roof. The integration under one roof wasn't easy. The convergence was imperfect, especially because there were hopes that economic convergence would lead also to political convergence, which we have understood will not happen. But it provided us with an incredibly successful period of economic growth and poverty elimination around the world. And the question is, what would it be like if all these nations had integrated into the world economy under their own terms, as opposed to under the one system, the one set of rules and principles, imperfect as they would be? What would the world look like if China had inserted itself into the global economy without a one framework? The integration under one system this incredible period of economic progress led to interdependence. And interdependence generated mutually advantageous benefits. Mutually advantageous benefits. It was a win-win, and it was seen as a win-win world. But this world also generated excessive dependencies. Dependencies that turned into risks. We saw this during COVID, when many countries discovered that very essential medicines that they needed to respond to this pandemic depended very often on one single source of supply. And if this source of supply was fragile, access to this resource was at risk. So an interdependence that becomes an excessive dependence, that becomes a risk, that can become even a liability, especially if interdependence or excessive dependencies are weaponized. This is what we have seen with oil, gas, or raw materials, with natural resources, or when they are used as instrument of economic coercion to achieve goals beyond the economy, as we have seen with tariffs left, right, and center in the last hours. Convergence, this dream of convergence, is giving way to fragmentation. And fragmentation will be very costly. Costly for the economies, costly for businesses. Ultimately, it will be costly for citizens too. The weakening of the goal of economic convergence, the fragmentation of the international economy, the weaponization of interdependence is a serious concern for the European Union. Why? Because the EU itself is built on this notion of economic and social convergence. Because intra-European trade has facilitated economic integration and has strengthened political ties within the EU. Because our dream is this idea that we fit under one system that can help advance all boats. Well, at the same time, trade with external partners has provided incredible innovation, market diversification, and ultimately competitiveness to Europe. Both the internal market and external trade are under pressure today. The third dream that the EU had, that is turning into a little bit of a nightmare, is that the EU thought that the transatlantic bond was solid. Europe and America worked very hard together, hand in glove, to build the post-World War II international order. European recovery and European integration was clearly supported by the United States, especially as the Cold War progressed. President Truman, at the time, saw a more prosperous Europe as a more stable Europe. It committed American defense through NATO because it understood that a peaceful future for Europe would reverse a long history of fighting in Europe. And ultimately, this would be also in the American interest. It is true that the failure of Europe in 1954 to advance a European defense community created doubts in the mind of the American leaders about the ability of Europe to bear the cost of defending itself. And when the French Parliament rejected the European Defense Community Treaty, West Germany became member of NATO, and NATO became the big vector to ensure the defense and security of the North Atlantic space. Hegemony and benevolence from the US. A US as a global power, but also the US thinking that it benefited from investing in an international order as a global power that would give, this engagement would give a stability. Engagement in Europe that ultimately would bring a stability to Europe and therefore to America too. The transatlantic relations have had their ups and downs, especially after the end of the Cold War. The first decade of the 21st century was difficult for the transatlantic relation. The invasion of Iraq in 2003, without a UN mandate, created a division between Europe and the US, and also within Europe. The rejection of the US of the Kyoto Protocol on climate change was disliked in the continent because Europe thought that we were forgoing a very important collective fight. The rejection by the US of the International Criminal Court status rang the alarm bells in Europe. Divisions were created when Europe saw that the US preferred unilateral to multilateral. It was also the time when the US was not particularly enthusiastic about the European Union advancing in its own European security and defense policy, which the US saw at the time as a threat to NATO. Still, there were ups and downs, but both Europe and America worked together to defeat international terrorism, to fight against jihadism, and much more. 2016 represented an inflection point. It didn't start in 2016, but it represented an inflection point. Why? Because this was the moment when, during the first Trump administration, there was a questioning of how much Europe was investing in NATO, questioning the commitment of Europeans to their own defense, questioning the organization itself, and through that, a weakening of the defense alliance at a moment when Russia had already invaded Crimea. Today, it's fair to say that this inflection point has turned into a point of rupture. And it's a point of rupture because there have been three fundamental changes. The first one is a change in the context. The 2014 invasion of Crimea by Russia is now a full-blown attempt by Russia to annex Ukraine, to end the existence of Ukraine as an independent and sovereign nation. Russia is at war with Ukraine, but it's also at war with Europe. And why? Because Europe has sided with Ukraine in the defense of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of a European nation. We see every day Russia's attack on European infrastructure, on energy infrastructure, on communications infrastructure, cyber attacks, or election interference, as we saw recently in Romania. The second thing that has changed is the European Union itself. There are growing political forces in Europe who are intent on weakening the European Union, who favor a different approach, favor a nationalistic approach, and prefer the nation to European integration. When the US Vice President or the unelected political operator that is Elon Musk, when they work to actively support these parties in Europe, including interfering in electoral processes in European member states, they are taking sides against European integration. The third thing that has changed is also the US. The former benevolent hegemon is today weaker, in particular because of its own unwillingness to maintain some form of international order. Or worse even, it blames the international order for all that doesn't work, real or fiction, in the US. There is this growing sentiment in the US that it is good to appropriate the benefits of globalization, and it is good to externalize all the costs of globalization. And there are costs in globalization. There are costs in trade opening. There are costs in technology progress. Externalizing those costs on the rest of the world as a result of an ideological incapacity to manage them at home. The US is questioning its economic and trade relationship with Europe. This we know how to handle because we've had ample experience in handling trade disputes with the US. But the US is also questioning today its support to Ukraine. And more broadly, it's even pushing Ukraine to accept making peace at a time when Russia has shown no inclination to enter into a peace negotiation with Ukraine. It's weakening the invaded and strengthening the invader. And this is new for us in Europe because it speaks of the lack of trust in our ability to defend ourselves and to defend the European integration and to defend the European sovereignty and territorial integrity. But the biggest surprise, in my view, to Europe has been the ideological proximity between the Trump administration, or should I say, the techno-libertarians, next or besides the US administration, and Russia's Putin. This ideological proximity that speaks of strong men reviving the destiny of the nations, which speaks of a patrimonial management of a state where checks and balances, administrations, expertise, civil servants are replaced by loyals, favors, and deals. Some call it empire. I think there is a Latin word that better reflects what this is. Emporium, a patrimonialistic approach to the management of a nation state. Is a vision of a decadent West that needs to go back to, quote unquote, its traditional roots. We are witnessing the systemic dismantlement of the checks and balances in the US. We are witnessing the systemic dismantlement of the international rules-based order. And we are seeing in Europe the weakening, the attempt to weaken the European integration process. So the EU thought that this was a solid alliance. It now finds itself confronted with an administration that wants to weaken the EU. It's an extraordinary turn of events, but it's also a moment of truth for Europe. The world looks less and less like the EU. So Europe has two choices. Either Europe changes and has the capacity to shape the world, shape the international order, shape its relations with other partners, or the EU renounces to take its future in its own hands, and it will become irrelevant or just another sphere of influence of somebody else. These are the two options that we have available. The only option that we don't have available is to stand still. So I want to devote the remainder of my intervention to sharing with you what can be done. You spend a lot of time in this university studying, dissecting, understanding, hearing. You probably by now are asking yourselves, what can we do? So I want to appetize you to do. Because at the end of the day, it would be very nice and very comfortable to stop at dissecting what's happening. It's more important that we understand what we need to do and how and with whom we can do it. And I have 4 small points to offer. Let me start with the first one. The first one is that Europe has options. The first one is to understand that we will be whatever we want to be. That there is no fatalism. That we are empowered to take our future forward. I am very shocked these days by the constant belittling of the European Union, by the constant underestimating the European Union. Sure, we've got problems. Sure, we could be more competitive. Sure, we need to integrate more. Sure, we can be more productive. Sure, our social systems can work better. But the starting point should not be that the glass is half empty, because with that we belittle ourselves and we distract. We remove energy, the energy that we need to keep on filling the glass. So our first task is to build our own self-esteem, our capacity to move forward. At a time when in the world the mood is to go nationalistic, we can show that there is another way. That the idea of pulling sovereignty to make ourselves more sovereign, stronger, is an avenue that can be pursued. The second, what to do is, we know that we need a new European integration effort. We know that we need to integrate more our single market, that in some areas, including services in particular, is not that single. So we know that we've got to integrate the energy markets, integrate the technology markets, integrate the capital markets. And we know that if we do that, we will gain in competitiveness. We know that we want to maintain sustainability, that the fight against climate change is an existential one, and we don't want to give this up. But we have also learned that we should not be dogmatic about how to go about it, that what we need is solutions that take us forward, and not only take us forward, but help others move forward. We today represent around 5% of global emissions. China still represents 30% of global emissions. India is 12% of global emissions and growing. We have to double down on climate change. We know that we have to leap forward on defense. We know where we have gaps in capacity. We have a sense of where and how to finance this additional effort in defense. We don't know very well what the organizational structure should be for the new European defense. But we know two things: that maybe not all EU members would want to advance on security and defense, and that there are other European countries that would want to be part of this effort at rendering the continent more secure. Countries like the UK, countries like Norway, countries like Turkey that we don't talk enough about, that are also committed to the security and defense of the continent. And we know that we need to start now, both because there is an emergency in Ukraine, but second, because the enemies of Europe are watching. And we know that we have to keep investing in the social cohesion in Europe. Social cohesion is not an afterthought in Europe, it's an integral part of the European recipe. The old Robert Schuman, this founding father that we hear a lot about, it's good to go back and read what he used to say, but he said, Europe will be built on concrete realizations, creating de facto solidarities. This is still the valid recipe. Third ingredient, it's about democracy. We are the European Union because we are a democratic space. And we have to remain a democratic space because that's what we want the European Union to be. Without fear for dissent, without manipulation or interference, without weakening the rule of law, upholding individual freedoms and individual rights. This is also the European Union, and this is also part of the recipe to build our own future. Finally, the European Union needs to remain open to others. Having spent 30 years of my life building the international rules-based order, I don't think we need to renounce to an international order. What we have to do is be a little bit better at teaming up with those who want to build this order, reform this order, solidify this order. And we have to pay more attention to the others, maybe, than we have been paying in the past. We don't need to renounce to interdependence or to economic openness. We just need to make sure that we are careful at managing excessive dependencies, building more internal market resilience, but also building a smarter partnership with others, like we are doing with the countries of the Mercosur, like we're doing with countries in the ASEAN region, like we are doing with countries all across Africa or Central Asia. This is also where we have to invest. And we don't have to renounce to our principles and values. The values and the principles of cooperation, solidarity, human rights. We don't have to renounce to those principles and values, but we have to be clearer when they come in conflict with our interest. We have to be clear about what the conflict means and what choices we make. My 30 years in private and public service have taught me one thing, and this is where I want to end, and this is the thought I want to leave with you. The future is not written anywhere. It will be what we want it to be. So I want to leave you with the words of someone that was very inspiring to me as a young European Commission officer, former President Jacques Delors. He had this expression that I want to share with you. You don't have to choose between optimistic and pessimistic. The choice you have to make is to be activistic. So, dear students, professors, guests, I leave you with the words of Jacques Delors. We have difficult times. We've got a long to-do list. But if we put our energy in this activistic mode, we will be writing our future. Thank you very much. And now over to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Arancha, for this very important remarks. And I think we have time for a few questions from all of you. I mean, this is a lecture, so feel free to ask. And Arancha will be very glad to answer your question. Don't be shy. You can ask any question you want, and that's an opportunity you need to take. So who wants to start? We go. Maybe we collect, Arancha, 2 or 3 questions, and then give a first round.
Hello. Do you think it is a mistake to scale back on our environmental policies to focus on economics and competitiveness when these environmental policies have been for us a competitive advantage?
Thank you. Was another question over there, I think. Yeah.
In these difficult economic times, how do we make sure to prevent slipping into a more autocratic state as well?
Third one, my right side is more active than the left side, but will compensate.
You mentioned the dangers of nationalism and kind of straying away from the EU. And I think a big topic right now is immigration. So what is your stance on like immigration from non-EU, mainly African and Middle Eastern countries, and kind of the solution?
Okay. Let's have this first round maybe, and then, oh yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
So you mentioned the role of Turkey. So my question is, how can we think of Turkey as a reliable partner, knowing that Turkey has a at least controversial regime? And for one thing, she mentioned immigration, and we know that Turkey is basically blackmailing the EU with immigration. Basically, whenever we do something they don't like, they open borders, and Greece is flooded with immigration with all the political problems that it gets. So how do you think we can collaborate with such regime? Thank you.
And we take, okay, let's have one round because otherwise we're going to be short of time. So we take a few questions more and then, yeah, you're taking due notes, so.
My question is also about Turkey. You mentioned cooperating with in the defense area with a regime that is clearly oppressing its citizens, and this is very this contrasts with the talk of values and democracy that you just mentioned when you cooperate with a regime that clearly oppresses media freedom and the political rights and freedoms of its citizens. So how can you explain the existence of this contradiction, and what can you do to fix this problem, especially given that the EU has not acknowledged the opposition's efforts in the election campaigns that occurred in the last year and so?
Okay, so let's ask Arancha to answer, and then we will go on with the civica ceremony, and we conclude. Thank you, Arancha.
So do we scale back on sustainability? So on the fight against climate change, but more broadly on sustainability, on protecting our biodiversity and fighting against pollution. Do we do that in the name of competitiveness? My answer clearly is no. We have to be able to walk and chew gum. But we've not been walking and chewing gum. We've been focusing on sustainability, and now we need to marry sustainability with competitiveness and with security, given the fact that there is also the weaponization of interdependence, and a lot of the things that we need in order to decarbonate our economy require access to raw materials. Take the example of the electric vehicle, for which we have neither the raw materials nor the battery technology. So it's not renouncing sustainability, because we know that at the end of the day, these three components are existential to us. If we have no life in this planet, it's pretty existential. If we have no ability to generate growth, it's pretty existential. And if we do not take care of our security, it's pretty existential. So it's about balancing these three. I think a bit of this is happening now, and maybe it's not that bad that it happens. Let me give you an example of why I think that this rebalancing that is happening is maybe not a bad thing. Take the example of reporting obligations on sustainability in the EU. It has been done in such a confused manner that any economic operator that has to do reporting on sustainability progress in their own economic activity has to fill in multiple websites with multiple questionnaires with multiple demands for the same information. So rationalizing how we ask companies to do reporting of sustainability criteria does not detract from the fight to protect our environment and simplifies the life of business. I therefore prefer to talk about simplification than to talk about deregulation. And I think these two are different propositions. And my sense is that we have to be careful that what we do in the name of balancing competitiveness and security with sustainability doesn't go in the direction of simply renouncing to do sustainability. It's existential to us. So it's how we drive it rather than renouncing to the objective. A bit of a test case is what's happening with the electric vehicle. Watch that space. The European Commission has been in a dialogue with the European automobile sector in order to understand how to balance these three considerations in this particular economic sector. And I think the new proposals that are being tabled, full plan will be unveiled tomorrow, goes in the direction of balancing the three, not renouncing to any of the three. How do we avoid turning into an autocratic state? Is upholding democracy. And this is very difficult to do because it's not just governments that uphold democracy. It's citizens with their own behavior that are responsible for nurturing democracy. Democracy in Europe is not just simply going to the ballots regularly. That is an important part of democracy. But democracy is also about efficiency, is delivering results, is delivering policies, is delivering actions, is delivering budgets that will help advance the objectives that we have put on the table and that we have discussed with our citizens. Democracy is also coherence. You can't say you're doing one thing and then you do the contrary, because this incoherence builds mistrust, and mistrust is what weakens democracies. So the democracy chapter is the most difficult one, because let's face it, Europe is not particularly virtuous at democracy either. We also have anti-democratic forces within the European Union. We have political parties, we have governments, and we have citizens that do not agree with Article 1 of the EU Treaty, which speaks of the importance of respecting the rule of law, which speaks of the importance of equal rights. Some people call this wokeism these days. So yes, we have to be very careful and very vigilant. And again, this is not just the task of governments and political parties. This is the task of each one of us citizens, because democracy at the end of the day is about citizenship too. Migration. Migration is an area where the EU has work to do to reconcile its value proposition with its own interests. And when I say to reconcile the two, it's not because the two are not reconcilable. It's because today we are, in many parts of Europe, chastising migration and putting together in the same bag irregular migration, regular migration, trafficking of human beings. We call this migration. And on the other hand, we are asking migrants to come to a continent because it is an old continent where demographics is not playing, where migration is a necessity. So how to organize this debate on migration in Europe, in my view, is to be clearer about how to do it, rather than taking very principled positions that we do not respect. Every country of the European Union today is importing migrants for their own economies. This is true of my own country, Spain. This is true of the country that hosts us, Italy. This is true of Denmark. This is true of Hungary. This is true of Germany. This is true of every nation in Europe. So the question is not yes or no, but how. And in the how, in my view, we've got lessons to learn to organize migratory flows better, to integrate and welcome better, to fight against human trafficking better, because this has become now a big business, trafficking with the misery of humans. And we have to be better at busting that too. But to me, it's an area where the EU has work to do, and it should start by acknowledging what is happening today in the European Union, rather than painting a world that does not exist. And also being clear that this element of regularity is what we need to work on. 5 minutes and two questions concerning Turkey. First, let me tell you that, not that you don't know, but Turkey is a NATO ally of the European Union, or rather of the European Union members that are members of NATO. So Turkey is an ally in NATO. And Turkey is the only country with whom the EU has an extremely developed customs union, with the idea that one day there would be integration of Turkey into the European Union as a member state. I think it's fair to say that the EU has found it hard to pursue integration of Turkey into the EU, and that Turkey has found it harder and harder to accept to be self-constrained by the requirements that being a member of the European Union entails. But Turkey is a neighbor of the European Union, and it's a neighbor that is gaining in geopolitical agility, that is bordering many states that are in conflict or post-conflict, and whose economy is extremely interdependent with that of the EU. Do we see eye to eye with Turkey on human rights, on civil liberties, on political liberties? No, we don't. Do we shy away from saying it? I don't think we do. Can we be the ones deciding the political fate of democracy in Turkey? I don't think so. What can we do is support Turkish citizens, Turkish organizations, Turkish political parties that want to fight this for Turkey. So as you have gathered, I'm not very fond of neocolonialism, but I do think that we need to have a functional relationship with Turkey that we have not built on in the last years because of this lack of clarity on both sides about what the future holds. In my view, the future for now does not hold membership in the EU. But the future can hold a relationship that is much more functional than it is today, including on security and defense.
Thank you, Arancha. And we can now move on to the last part of our lecture, which is the ceremony for awarding the Civica papers. I invite on the stage, Francesco Saita, our Dean for International Relations. Welcome, Francesco. Thanks for being with us today. Francesco will tell you about this prize, to which when you go to the graduate program, you can of course, try to participate in. Francesco.
Thank you, Carlo. So we are here to give the prize for the Civica Capstone Project competition. It's an important competition that has been launched in academic year 2021-22, according to the multi-campus course, The Future of Europe, which is one of the flagship initiatives of Civica, an alliance of the 10 leading European higher education institutions in social sciences. And we try to be European citizen builders in the approach that has been described earlier by both our speakers. And I think that's a very important project in which the course, The Future of Europe, is a particularly unique experience. Today, we are glad to celebrate the 4th edition of the Capstone Project competition, which has been launched with the crucial support of the Fondazione Achille Giulia Boroli in 2021, and I'm truly grateful to the foundation for this precious support, which aims at assigning 3 awards to the students delivering the best projects within this multi-campus course. In this 4th edition of the multi-campus course, which has been realized in the 2024 fall semesters, we had 7 professors for 6 different Civica partner universities working together in the same course, outlining and critically appraising the challenging areas of policy making facing the European Union in the coming years. And I want to thank particularly Professor Gonzalez for her unwavering commitment and support to this innovative pedagogical activity. In representing Bocconi in the Civica network, I know which incredible initiatives have been developed, and I think that the part of the work of the multi-campus course is probably one of the best things we've done to clarify the idea of integration among professors, students, and the kind of joint work that has come up is a testimony to this. So throughout the fall semester, over 150 students have been working in transnational teams to complete a final capstone project aimed at developing and proposing evidence-based policy solutions on 4 European Union relevant policy challenges: globalization, democracy, environment, and digitalization. Out of 33 groups completing the projects, 14 have qualified for the Boroli competition, and 3 winning projects have been selected by a committee of professors coordinated by the Achille and Giulia Boroli Chair in European Studies for their forward-thinking analysis and the suggestions on the assigned challenges. But of course, I also want to congratulate all the other teams who just participated, gave their contribution. I think this is kind of project that really brings together people working in the right direction. Probably we should be more and more capable of spreading the word about this kind of projects also outside the university realm. Following up the announcement of the winning teams in early February, let me now invite Carlo Altomonte and Andrea Boroli to join me on stage to officially congratulate the 3 teams. We are going to give the prize to all the 3 teams together, calling them on stage. So let me mention who the winners are. The first winning team is team number 10, that has tackled the globalization challenge through their project work, which is titled Beyond the EPC, Gradual Integration and Consistent Oversight for an Enlarged Union. And I'm give my congratulations to Diego Pastur from Bocconi, Filippo Cambielli from Bocconi, Yuan Zong from Hertie School, Florian Boucher from Hertie School, and I'm kindly inviting Diego Pastur and Florian Boucher to come up on stage to receive the Borrelia Board certificate. And I also extend my congratulations to Yuan Zong and Filippo Cambielli. The second winning team that we are going to, congratulations. Congratulations. The second winning team is team number 13 for their impressive work on the Democracy Challenge. The title is Building Trust, Curbing Lies, a Digital Badge to Politically Misinformation. And the team has been composed by Davide Bello from Bocconi, Claudia Caffo from Bocconi, Ririco Irase from LSE, Emma Bergman Carson from Stockholm School of Economics, and Theo Tevenin from Stockholm School of Economics. I'm kindly inviting Davide Bello and Ririco Irase to come up on stage. And let me also extend my congratulations to Claudia Caffo, Emma Bergman Carson, and Theo Tevenin. And the third team is team number 31, focusing on the Environment Challenge with a brief title, Strategies for a Water-Resilient Clean Industrial Deal, a Policy Blueprint. The team has been composed by Daniel Fine, Central European University, Pablo Dufour from LSE, Sofia Danker from Sciences Po, Celeste Del Vecchio from Sciences Po, and Arnaud Foubert from Sciences Po. I'm kindly inviting Pablo Dufour, Sofia Danker, Celeste Del Vecchio, and Arnaud Foubert, and also congratulate Daniel Fine, who is attending the ceremony online. Congratulations.
We take it quick pictures and then we give the floor to Gianmarco for that. Yeah. Yeah. See? Bravi, grazie. Grazie, grazie mille. So let us conclude the lecture, and it's a great pleasure to give the floor to my friend and colleague Gianmarco Ottaviano, holder of the Achille and Giulia Bolori Chair in European Studies, for his final remark. He has a very interesting book in his hands, which I would like him to show later. So just a few seconds. Thank you, Gianmarco.
Thank you. So thank you all, and thank you, the foundation. Thank you, the Bocconi, for organizing this and giving us the opportunity of hosting Arancha Gonzalez for this amazing speech. There are a lot of things that could be discussed. We could go forever discussing the priorities, but I think what we've seen today is some concreteness in terms of the way ahead, and also some view of the future. So we should at some point stop looking backwards. I think in some sense, the strength of the United States has always been that being a land of immigrants, and we know past attached to the local ground, they seldom looked to the past and used to look to the future. And what we're seeing these days has been, as it has been actually stressed by Arancha, is that we have something which is amazing for the US, among other things. They start look to the past, which in the case of the United States is often a past that is invented because of this reason that the past is not there. So I hope that across the pond, our friends will go back and look to the future, and ourselves, we should look to the future. What I have but after saying that, I'm a bit inconsistent because I'm looking at the past. What is this book? This is the first edition of the Memories of Jean Monnet, one of the founding father of the European Union. It's a book that I bought as a student at your age at the flea market. And it looked very remote already at that time to me, because it was really things that happened across the two world wars and soon afterwards. But I think it is important, and it is important also because inside this book I found something else, which I forgot about until today. That is an original postcard of a promotional event in Rome in October and November 1948. And it was a promotional event of something that was called European Recovery Program. Sounds familiar, I guess. What was that? This was called, and now you know it, as the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan, and it is in Italian, and you get, in the back, there is this promotional thing. I will not read and translate everything, but it starts essentially with this statement. With the help of the United States, we're going to reconstruct Europe, etc., etc. And then I said, okay, this is very interesting, because someone recently said that Europe has been created to screw the United States. And it seems that it was created with the help of the United States. And then I looked at the picture that is here. You cannot probably see it, or maybe. So you see there is an arch with all the flags of the countries that were involved at that stage in the Marshall Plan. And there is a keystone, and I guess you cannot see it, but the flag of the keystone is the United States. And so I found that some way very interesting that by chance, this popped up today when I was looking at this stuff before this lecture. And so there are things that we should remember. And so we should look at the future, but not forget the past. The European Union, what is now the European Union, has been built thanks to the United States. Peace in Europe has been achieved thanks to the United States. And I think all our European colleagues and also everybody knows that that has happened. And so in the future, I would like to not to be greeted in Washington by someone saying that we should be thankful to the United States, and we never been grateful to them. Another thing that I think is important about the past and about this book is that it describes how Europe has been built, also not only from an economic point of view, but also from a defense point of view after the Second World War. And there is something that is forgotten. So of course, we know in the 50s, and Arancha has reminded us that in 54, there was a particularly important moment in which the US doubted about the commitment of Europe to its own defense. But we should remember where we were coming from. So there was a war in Europe. Some countries won, some countries lost. And those who lost received a lot of constraints as part of the peace treaties. So if you just think about some things, so who has, let me be very simplistic, but who has the atomic bomb in Europe? It's France, and the UK. Why is France and the UK? Because they won the war and the other countries lost. It's not because Italy or even more Germany were not able to have nuclear weapons. Actually, the US nuclear weapons were built also thanks to the contribution of the Italian and German scientists who fled the autocracies in Europe. So democracy in Europe is there thanks to the United States and the contribution of our immigrants. Another thing, to be simplistic, have you ever heard about the mighty German or Italian Navy? I don't think so. Have you ever heard about air carriers that are under the German and the Italian flag? No. Have you heard about something similar about Japan? No. These countries lost the war and were forbidden investing in advanced weapons. So and by whom, of course? By the United States, in agreement with the Soviet Union and the winners. So about the Soviet Union, we have heard a lot about the US reneging on rules and the rule-based system. There was a moment in which we thought Russia was converging to a rules-based system. And it was the G8 country. I mean, maybe you're too young to remember, of course, or maybe you were not there, but it was invited to the G7 meetings. There were joint military trials sometimes. And also, that's a country that now, but at some point before, decided to break the rules. And one important international agreement was between Russia and Ukraine on nuclear weapons. Ukraine had nuclear weapons. They were there, left by the Soviet Union, because Ukraine was closer to the enemies, was closer to us. And so they were based there. There was an international agreement between Russia and Ukraine in which Ukraine surrendered or passed the nuclear weapons to Russia under the understanding, the written understanding, that would be protected by Russia and by the US. So whatever we hear today, we have to be careful and go back and read some things that you find very easily, actually. And remember that where we are now is also because Russia and the United States designed the way the military confrontation is taking place. So there are a lot of things, as I said at the beginning, and I will stop, things that you should remember. We should be grateful to those who won the Second World War, and other things that we are told that we are not behaving properly simply because we could not behave properly in the way they want now, because we signed agreements and Europe always stuck to the agreements that we signed. And so this is where we are now. And I think that as I said, we could go on forever discussing these things, but it is important. We should look at the future, but remember where we're coming from. So thanks, everybody. I think it's been a great morning.
Thanks to all of you. Have a good day. And thanks to all of you. Thanks to the Boroli Foundation, all my colleagues and you students. All the best and have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.